approach. Our first treatment approach is going to be the phonetic placement therapy, and this uses verbal instruction to cue the patient on how to move the articulators, such as the tongue, the lips, the teeth, the jaw, in order to produce sounds more accurately. This also can reduce substitution errors and final consonant deletions because it allows for Matthew to have a more overall awareness of where the sounds are produced, what kind of movements he needs to make in order to get those sounds out. So this mostly helps with sound production itself, which is very important for children with apraxia because it is a motor speech disorder. So the minimal pairs therapy is the next treatment approach that we're going to use, and it was similar to what I was talking about on the last slide, where you pair together two words that only differ in their final consonant and have the patient identify the differences between them. So in the initial therapy, final S cluster sounds, which included TS, PS, and KS, were not tested because Matthew was unable to produce those sounds at that time. And now that he is a little bit older and has had some treatment, it's important to sort of see what deficits or maybe what's types of errors that he's making. It's really important to sort of just use repetition and consistency to make sure that all problems of speech are addressed and nothing is left brushed under the rug or forgotten. Interestingly enough, the final consonant deletion is the same for the S clusters as it is for the final consonants. The only difference, of course, is the S. And the purpose of this is to improve the overall phonological awareness of sounds, because when Matthew is continuously asked to identify and recognize these processes, then he will begin to have a better understanding of the patterns that occur in speech and language, which is something that sometimes children with apraxia struggle with. What I find very interesting is that a lot of people don't even realize how much we can do without even knowing that we can do it, So just being aware of phonological processes and just not doing substitutions and making sure you have that final consonant at the end of the word, that's something that comes naturally to most children, and something that they learn in their early development, and by the time they start school, usually it's pretty much, good speech, perfect, able to speak to just about anyone. And we kind of take for granted that we sort of just have this natural understanding of how things work and how sounds go together, when children with apraxia don't have that same understanding. They sort of have to learn everything from square one because there's no innate process that's sort of helping them out. They kind of have to use therapy and learn for themselves, which is why it's important to use therapy and provide the patient with continuous sessions. So for our target, Matthew will produce words without final consonant deletion 50% of the time in a course of 4 weeks. So that's pretty self-explanatory. We just want him to be able to for our stimulus, so in order to do this pretty much, in order to complete our target, we are going to be using a variety of games as stimulus. So for the first game, this was involving the letter cards that were on the slide about the sounds, about evoking sounds. So this is the letter cards, playing the letter game where Matthew will have to have final consonant sounds that he struggles with. Let's say T or P, like individual cards say T or P, and then he'll have a word fragment that can connect to both those sounds. So for example, like there'd be a card that says CA, and that card would be placed here, and then Matthew would have to take the T sound, put it next to the CA, so that way it reads the word cat, and then say the word cat, and then maybe take the P and replace the T, and then say cap, and just practice, it not only provides the repetition of producing the sound, but it also gives a visualization of the final consonant and how it can be attached to the word to change meaning, which is once again really important for Matthew. And another game that we could do, this is more of just like a game to build up Matthew's confidence, to sort of get him in the mood to participate in therapy and to be eager about it, because my personal philosophy is that there's no point my personal philosophy is that if you start things out too much, like if you go straight into what he's really struggling with, then he's probably going to become discouraged and feel bad and, not want to come back, because I know personally, like if I go to an exercise class or like a new exercise class or anything like that, and I feel like I can't keep up, it's going too fast, it's too much at once, it's too challenging, it can really hinder your confidence in your own abilities, and it can also sort of make you not want to go back to either the gym or therapy or wherever it was where you sort of felt very discouraged. So I think it's important to start out maybe with something more simple, just to start the first session or two, and to boost his confidence up and get him motivated and get him understanding what he's going to need to do for therapy. So the playing hide and seek with a penny involves having two pictures, kind of like the beak and bee photo on the evoking sound slide, and a penny. So the teacher is going to put a penny under one of the pictures, and she is going to say the name of the picture that she put. Okay, so the hide penny using minimal pairs. Basically, all that Matthew has to do in this game is hear a sound and be able to identify what sound was produced. So he doesn't have to produce the sound. We're just trying to make sure that he's able to maybe even hear the differences in words and hear the differences in the final consonant, because if he's not able to hear the differences or perceive any changes in how these words sound, then he's got a whole nother problem. There's no point working on just having him produce them if he can't. Maybe he could produce the sound, but if he can't apply it to his speech, then there's really no point. The thing about apraxia is you really kind of have to bring it all together. Like, you have to bring it all together, or else there will be deficits. And once Matthew starts reaching a level of competency, and he's saying the words consistently, or he's able to recognize the words consistently, and he's just, maybe almost getting even bored of it a little bit, then you can switch to role playing. But it's important to note that when Matthew does first start the treatment, it's good to provide a lot of positive reinforcement, such as a high five, a good job, maybe just like a thumbs up or anything. And once he progresses further into therapy, then you can use the positive reinforcement less and less. So even if he does answer a question correctly, you maybe won't give him positive reinforcement for that particular word because, maybe it was a word that he didn't really struggle with in the first place, or just sort of, what it does is it kind of just, keeps him motivated to try to get more positive reinforcement, to try to get more answers right without making him feel like no matter what he does, he's going to get a thumbs up. So I think reinforcement should be used carefully, because otherwise it can take away from, in my opinion, the credibility of the SLP. When someone's just sitting there always telling you, great job, when you know you didn't do a good job at something, you're kind of just like, what is wrong with you? You know what I mean? You'll just be like, what are they talking about? Were we in the same place? So for the role-playing, what happens in this game is basically Matthew says the word this time. So he'll either say bee or beak, and the teacher will then point to the picture that he says. And so you might wonder, what's the point of that? Not only is it trying to get sound production, but I think it also makes him more aware of how people perceive what he says. For example, when I was reading about this activity, it said if he said bee instead of beak, then, or if he meant to say beak, he meant to say the word beak, but he said bee. And the teacher knew he meant to say beak, she could tell, but she would still point to the picture of the bee because that's what he said. And that could be maybe a little bit frustrating for Matthew, but it could also be motivating because he'll sit there and go, I thought I said beak, but she thinks I'm saying bee. That's annoying. Maybe I really need to stress the beak, the K sound. I mean, he probably won't think about it like that, it's so SLP-like, but you know what I mean. He's like, well, I better pronounce it more clearly so she understands and doesn't think I'm saying something else, because little kids, they can get real frustrated about stuff like that, and they want things a certain way. So maybe that could motivate him to say the sound more clearly. And for the data to be charted, this is data from one session of Matt's production of consonant sounds in the final position. So, like I said, it's the P, T, K, T, S, K, S sounds, and he has 50% production for P, T, TS, and PS. However, the K sounds might still need to be worked on in therapy.